Hello, and welcome back to Desert Gardening News, a Star Nursery podcast. I'm Joey Lynn. This is our co-host, Madeline, and we are so excited to have you today for this very, very special installment of Desert Gardening News. I have Paul, our home Dr. Q here, the one and only Paul, and we are so excited to have you today. And we have a special guest, don't we? We have Jim Ed, and he is actually our original Dr. Q. And we're just so excited to get right in it and talk all things Star Nursery store brand Dr. Q and how it came to be and all that good stuff. So Paul, if you'd like to say hello and tell us a little bit about the Dr. Q's house calls, that would be really great.
Yeah, that's I'm happy Jim Ed here has made it because, like you said, he's the original Dr. Q. He was the first. He's the one that set the example for me and one other person who was in between us as a Dr. Q. But I guess I've been the longest standing of the Dr. Qs, and it's been a pleasure to do it because I enjoy, just like Jim Ed does. I know we enjoy giving other people the knowledge that we've learned over the many years we've had in the horticulture industry, and it's just a pleasure for me to go out on house calls. Because we did decide that a lot of times we can't give a correct answer to a person who's asking about problems if we don't see exactly what the situation is that they have. We recommend to bring in samples like branches or leaves or pictures, but you still can't get the whole idea unless you see the surrounding environment. And that's the whole reason why we set up these house calls, is so that we can get out into a customer's yard, see exactly what the plants are doing, what the soil's like, what the situation is, which way it faces, how many trees shade what, and that's the only way you can really make a determination of what the problem actually is. And I'm just thrilled that I've been able to take that project over and run with it. But Jim Ed was the original one, and he's the one that I follow.
Well, to piggyback on what Paul has said, to me the exciting part of it is helping the customer, and it's almost like being a school teacher when you see that light go on that they got it. It's
That's
like,
right.
Oh, I understand, and from then on they're in good shape. We always look at the customers as part of the Star family. We want them to come back. We want them to be happy. We want them to be satisfied. And we're willing to do whatever it takes for that to happen.
Well, we still get the privilege of having you come into the stores, and you work seasonally within our stores. And you want to tell us a little bit about that and how long you've been coming in seasonally to do that?
Well, initially, when I first started at Star Nursery in March of 1989, I had no idea I was going to work for Star. I just retired from the Air Force, bought a house, and was looking to get some plants. And since I had been here in Las Vegas previously, I made all the plant mistakes that people make. So I knew what I really needed to get. So I went to the Boulder Highway store, struck up a conversation with the manager. She wanted to know if I would like a part-time job. I said yes, and it led to a career, which was pretty amazing. I was very, very happy to stay with it, to do it. So, first Dr. Q. Yeah, that brings to mind, how did that happen?
Yes, tell us how that happened.
The news people were out. We used to do news spots all the time, Channel 8, Channel 5, Channel 13, in the morning, during the rest of the day. Well, I'd finished a spot, was there. Craig happened to be in the store, and the news people were there.
Our fearless leader.
Yeah, and the guy said, I said, he's the owner. So he walked over and introduced himself, and he said, "Oh, you must be Dr. Q." And Craig turned around and said, "No, he is." And he pointed to me, and from that point on, I wore that title.
It was official.
It was official, and it was good. I enjoyed doing it.
Finger pointing.
There you go. You were voluntold.
But not to beat a dead horse, but to go throughout the time. I went from part-time sales to assistant store manager to research and development manager at corporate for the Dr. Q's line, redoing the sign program, bringing back the green pages. Green pages had been filed away in the dead area, and we brought it back, got it going, and it's still going now. So.
It is really, truly so exciting. These are things that we are just so proud to have coming through the community, and we're consistent and we're doing it. And we think that the podcast is that next little step of our family, our extended family, getting to see us, getting to know who we are, and just another piece of that puzzle of just expanding our love for this community. Well, with that, I think that we'd like to start talking about fertilizers. I think that is a great way for us to start. So, Paul, tell us what is a fertilizer and why do we need it? Let's just start real simple.
Well, fertilizers are basically a replacement for what is in the soil that has been used up or is not sufficient enough to sustain plant growth. So that's why we fertilize, is basically to replace those things to encourage the plant to grow more steady, more vibrant. So that's basically what they are. They're composed of organic and some inorganic materials, minerals, and when talking about organic and non-organic, basically organic materials are things that come from plants or animals, and that can be bark, chips, dried leaves, decomposed matter. It has to decompose and break down into the soil to help condition the soil. And we pride ourselves in being able to supply a fertilizer that will actually be more beneficial in this desert Southwest than most any other fertilizers that you can buy anywhere. So basically, it's just plants actually produce their own food. Basically, we call these foods, but they're basically just products that will provide the soil to produce those elements and put them into liquid form in the soil solution that plant roots can absorb and pick up and make them healthier.
Jim, was there anything you wanted to add to that?
Basically, all I think about it is a chemical fertilizer feeds the plants, an organic fertilizer or organic-based fertilizer, which is what our Dr. Q's products are. They feed the plants and feed the soil. You activate the soil, there's crustaceans and microbes and things like that that are really inactive in our sterile soils until we use the fertilizers that we have, which stimulates their activity and adds to the breakdown of the nutrients so the plants can use it.
Now, I heard something in there, organically based. So tell us the difference between organically based fertilizer versus our quote unquote organics. Can you expand on that?
Well, organic fertilizers, as Paul mentioned earlier, they come from plants or animals. And in organic fertilizers, you have nitrogen, you have phosphorus, you have potassium, and in some you have calcium. All comes from an animal or a plant source. And the organic-based fertilizers have the same things. They also have micronutrients, which are critical to plant growth. Mm-hmm. And we can call ours organic-based because our granules in each one of these fertilizers is encapsulated in organic material. Sea kelp, there's leonardite for natural soil acidification. And when you put all that together, you got the organic-based fertilizers, which is far better than any of the standard fertilizers on the market today.
So with our organic labeled section of fertilizers, those are OMRI listed. Can you tell the audience what is the importance of having it OMRI listed, or what does it mean to be OMRI listed, Paul?
Well, OMRI is basically a certification to a producer of the products, and they the producers have to go through a process to prove that they only use organic materials. That's all that's in the product. And they have to go through testing, and send samples to the batches and everything to make sure that it's always done the same way, and that it does not contain any inorganic materials in the products that they use. And that's basically one of the major certifiers of organic products. And that anything that has the OMRI certification on it means that has been proven and is authorized to sell as an organic product.
So that the customer can have confidence
Yes.
in that from beginning of the process of getting all of the essential elements to the end to bagging, it has all been organically sourced.
Yes, that is true.
That is fabulous.
Now, there is something else that Jim Ed brought up, is that because of OMRI certification, that means that those fertilizers only have organic products. But like Jim Ed said, there are also micronutrients in a lot of our fertilizers that are very helpful and needful for plants to do well. But because they are minerals, they are not organic. They don't come from plants or animals. They come from minerals that are in rock and soil that are broken down. But basically, it all comes from rock. I mean, that decomposes, that breaks down into boulders and smaller rocks and into sand or gravel and sand. And so basically all that product, those minerals, become so broken down that they actually get into the solution of the soil. And that's the only way that plants can take those up, but they're not organic.
One thing that really interests me about our fertilizers is the leonardite that happens to be in them. Our soils are very, very alkaline, sometimes so alkaline it's difficult for plants to grow at all. Now, leonardite is a highly acidic fossil shell product. Actually, fossils, from millions and millions of years ago, taken, ground up, and added to fertilizers to help acidify the soil. And I think that's fascinating, because it really helps our soils here in the Las Vegas Valley.
When we use terms like alkaline and acidic, we are referring to the pH of the soil.
Correct.
Correct. And every plant has a different pH need.
Or tolerance.
Or
exactly.
tolerance.
Exactly.
Or tolerance.
Correct.
Thank you. That's a good one, Jim. So knowing this is how we know which fertilizer or how to apply it or when. And so that's the reason that we have a whole line of different fertilizers. It's so that the homeowner can walk in and see the plant, and that fertilizer is going to serve that plant's needs for macro and micronutrients, and also within the tolerance of a pH, right? It's going to help keep that soil within that plant's tolerance. So why don't you, let's talk a little bit about, go ahead.
One other comment, if you look at Dr. Q's line, you see all the really nice bags with the colors.
Yes.
People ask me about that. I said, look at that. It's a convenience line. If you come in here looking for tomato food, there it is. Tree, shrub, and vine food, there it is. A palm food, there it is. You don't have to scratch your head and wonder what to get. It's right there in front of you.
Yeah, the truth is that all fertilizers are basically the same. They all contain basically the same products or nutrients. Okay, so depending on what your needs of your plant is, whether you need to produce green leaf growth for hedges or shade trees, you'll want something with more nitrogen in it, because that's what plants use to produce green leaf growth or green lawns. That's why the high nitrogen in lawn fertilizers. Okay, but if you're not looking to do that, but you want to produce more fruit or flowers, then you need something with a higher phosphorus content. Okay, so all of these have all of those elements in it. It's just that some of them have higher certain ones depending on what your plant needs are. And so that's why we can put them in a bag. The truth is that you can use any fertilizers on any plants. You just have to be careful of their tolerance, like Jim Ed said, because some plants can't tolerate high nitrogen, especially in hot weather. But basically, all fertilizers are the same. I mean, you could use one fertilizer for all of your plants if you wanted to. I mean, and a good recommendation for that is our triple play right there, 777 balanced fertilizer. Also contains 7% iron, and which is higher than a lot of our other fertilizers have. So it contains all, and it contains the micronutrients. So it contains everything a plant needs. So if you wanted to fertilize your entire yard with one fertilizer, that one you could use. But if you're focused on producing a certain element of your plant, then you'd want to look for a specific fertilizer that has more of those nutrients in it.
Paul has gotten into the difference between chemical and organic-based fertilizer very nicely, because that's pretty much what it is. You can go in any store, ours or any other store, and find fertilizer, all purpose. And what Paul said is right. You can grab that, you can use it for everything. But is it optimal? Is it going to be the best for the plant? It is not. It helps to know what the plants need. Just for instance, roses they do one thing at a time. They either produce leaves or produce flowers. You give them high nitrogen, you get a big leafy bush with very few flowers. Therefore, rose fertilizers have low nitrogen and high phosphorus. Just enough nitrogen to keep the plant active and plenty of phosphorus for your flowers. And that's just one example. The same holds true for so many others.
So on each bag of fertilizer that you would go into any store and you're going to see the 3 numbers, would you be able to tell our audience, let's say they're brand new to fertilizers, which each number is? That way they know what to look for?
Absolutely. And that's one of the most important things you want to learn when you're talking about fertilizers. Because, like you said, there's 3 numbers on the front of a bag of fertilizer in 99.9% of all fertilizer bags or containers. Those 3 numbers are the macronutrients, or NPK, for nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, because that's what these 3 numbers represent, the percentages that are in this bag of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, always in that same order. And that'll give you the percentage. So if you need a lot of nitrogen for leaf growth, you pick up a bag with a higher nitrogen first number. If you want more flower or fruit production, pick up a bag with the higher middle number. And the potassium or potash, basically that's what plants use for their structure, their stem development. Their also a lot has to do with their health as far as resistance to diseases and infections and things like that. So that's an important part too. It's not as flagrantly noticeable as what the nitrogen and phosphorus does, but it's very important for plant growth. So those 3 things are the macronutrients. Now on the back of the bag is normally where they tell you about all the micronutrients. And those micronutrients are things like copper, zinc, manganese, iron, a lot of these minerals that are mostly, non-organic, because they are minerals and not per se organic. So that's where they're listed. And all of those are important for the health of a plant as well. And they're a lot less percentage of those micronutrients are used. That's why they call them micro, because plants can survive on less than 1% of a lot of these, whereas the macronutrients are always in full percentages because plants need more of it. So that's where the difference in those micro and macronutrients are, and where you find them on the package.
Absolutely. The difference in that and in the organic fertilizers, which we talked about earlier, Paul mentioned the macronutrients. You look at the organics, there's a fourth one in there, it's calcium. That's been commonly referred to as the fourth macronutrient. Reason, and people say, well, our soil's loaded with calcium. You know, calcium carbonate is caliche. We got it everywhere. The problem is the calcium in our soils is bound up because of the high pH. Therefore, we add calcium to those fertilizers in the form that the plant can use. And that's why it's in there. And that basically is the only extra ingredient in the organic fertilizer besides the NPK that Paul had talked about.
In adding to that, also, there is a lot of elements that are in our soil here naturally, but they're not broken down into the final stage that is actually accessible for plants to take in. And that's one real important thing to know, is that, you know, maybe the soil is high in calcium and maybe it's high in phosphorus, but not all of that elements that are in the soil naturally are available to the plants. So we have to either use a more broken down form in our fertilizers so that it can be accessible to the plants more easily, or we need to use certain things to activate what is naturally in the soil and help break it down quicker so that plants can use it.
That's what the organic elements in all our fertilizers do. They feed the soil. They activate soil microbes, which break down the fertilizer, those elements, and make them available for the plant to use, which they do very well.
In that same conversation, talk about how the iron that we use that is in our store brand and how that is available to the plant.
Go ahead.
There's basically, in all the articles that you read in the paper, horticulturalists use, Bob Morris, who's one of my favorite guys. They talk about chelated iron that is made so it's readily available to plants. In our iron worker, for instance, we have iron sucrate. That's a sugar-based iron, and if you look on the internet, and I encourage people to do this, sucrate is used much more efficiently and much faster than chelate is. And we put that in our fertilizers, and we were able to do that at a very, very reasonable price, much better than most of the chelated iron products. But iron is absolutely necessary for that good, rich green color, as well as the nitrogen that we talked about earlier.
And can you talk a little bit about the difference to the different nitrogens?
Well, you know, a long time ago, even before our days, people used to use iron like nails and things like that because they rust and they leave iron. You know how long that takes?
Years.
Yes, a long time. So that's an example of a source of iron that can be absorbed or been added to the soil, but it's not available to plants, not right away. So that's why iron has to be broken down more, and there's different stages of it. You know, there's iron oxide. There's iron
phosphate.
Iron phosphate. See, these are different stages that it's broken down to, and it's not till you get to the chelated that actually starts becoming more readily available to plants. So even though it may list it on some things, if they're listed as a iron sulfate or iron phosphate or iron sulfate or you know, they're not broken down enough to be. They need to be in that soil for a long period of time in order for the plant to be able to use it. So the chelates and the sucrates are much more actively available to the plants, and especially the sucrates. Because they are more of a sugar-coated accessed element, they are absorbed. The plant roots actually go after those because they're after sugars and carbohydrates and things that they actually produce for their own food. So they're more attracted to that form. So they're going to take it up quicker.
You might note that all of that is necessary here because we have such miserable soils. Probably phosphates or sulfates might work back where you had a loamy, rich, acidic-based forest or something like that. But here we have nothing. And we really need the type of micronutrients that Paul was talking about in the available form so the plants can use them.
And going back to what Madeline was talking about too is the pH level, and like Joey Lynn brought up, that pH level is it's actually a scale between 0 and 14, with 0 being hydrochloric acid, I guess is probably the closest thing to it. Very, very acidic. And the top of the scale is 14, which would be very basic, like lime, straight lime, or what's another basic element that would...
I don't know, lime's about the only thing I think of as being that completely alkalinic, as it is.
And
salt.
So,
yeah,
that scale between 0 and 14, so 7 is neutral, is completely neutral. And most plants grow best between like 6.5 and 7.5 on that scale. Now, there are some acid-loving plants that will grow fine and lower, maybe down to 5, 5.5. And then some desert plants that are more tolerant of the alkalinity that will grow fairly well in, 7.5 to 8.5. And the truth is our native soil around the valley here is about 8.2 to 8.3. It's, it's very, very basic. So what grows here? Very basic tolerating cactus and succulents that can grow in that basic level in the upper pH scale. So in order to get plants, if you want more tropical looking or more leafy type plants, you need to lower that pH down into that 6.5 to 7.5 percentage in order to get them to grow better.
Well, we've talked about why our fertilizers are a little different from what you can find on these different name brands. Can you tell us a little bit about why the fertilizer line Dr. Q was created in the first place?
Well, yeah, it's primarily because the desert Southwest, and in particular the Mojave Desert that we are in, is different than almost anywhere else in the country. I mean, so the soil is very different. And so it's so hard to get good results from national brand fertilizers that are sold the same fertilizer for the entire country. So that's why we wanted to make sure that our customers were serviced by the best results they could get by the products that we sold, whether that be plant material or fertilizers or whatever. And our owner was very adamant about that. And so that's why we started looking at what we could do to create our own line of fertilizers that were specifically good for the desert Southwest and specifically for the Las Vegas Valley and the closely surrounding areas around us. And it was started by going to a fertilizer company based in Utah, up in Salt Lake. The name is C-Source, which is does business all over the country, but they are specialists in getting the best products and components for fertilizers of any other manufacturer that we came across in the country. So that's one reason why we went to them. And they were able to, they actually can source products that are good for our environment that come from Australia and New Zealand, and they can put those into our products because we said, well, yeah, we need that then because it's specifically for our type soils. So we went to them with different recommendations of what we needed to take care of in our soil, the alkalinity, the different elements that were too high or too low needed to be taken care of. And we let their scientists put together the formulas. We worked with them to do that for our particular line of fertilizers. So they are specifically for our area, for our desert Southwest areas.
And 30 years later, C-Source is still our manufacturer for our Dr. Q line. But our Dr. Q line did not start with such variety. We actually started 30 years ago with just the Dr. Q's Plant Tonic and the Gold Dust Starter Fertilizer. And these products, not much has changed to them in 30 years because of how reliable they are. And if you're unfamiliar with the products, we're going to talk a little bit about how to use them, why we use them, and the benefits that they have with the plant. So if one of the Dr. Qs want to take over and talk a little bit about our first two products to the Dr. Q line.
Why don't you go ahead? Well, basically, you started with this. What the bottle actually says prevents transplant shock. What are people going to do? They buy a plant, they want a plant, they want it to succeed. What's the best way to do that? Dr. Q's Plant Tonic in water to get the plant established with the least amount of stress. As a matter of fact, a lot of times people will use this product if they have stress plants in order to bring it out of stress, and it works really, really well. So it's balanced, it's complete, it has root transplant shock prevention, and it's probably the best thing I've ever seen to be used for that reason. The starter fertilizer, Dr. Q's Gold Dust, is also very good. I don't know if I even want to say that, but a lot of people will use that is for a starter, for a flower food, for a vegetable food, almost anything. Because you look at the numbers, you compare the numbers, they're very close. But as Paul had pointed out a long time ago, when I mentioned to him, I said, some people are saying, why do I need this and that? Because they're both virtually the same. Well, this gets your plant established rapidly and protects it. And the starter fertilizer is there for a long period of time, several weeks, a couple of months, to provide continuous growth to the plant.
Yeah, the important thing about, like what Jamed said, is that this is basically a root stimulant. It goes directly to the roots. It's in a liquid form. It's dissolved. And so they're going to quickly pick that up, and it's going to stimulate more root growth, which is what should be done for all plants to get them to grow and be a good growing plant. You don't want to force a lot of top growth without getting the roots developed first. That's got to be the first issue. So it does no good to pump a bunch of nitrogen into a plant you just planted and have all of that go immediately to a flush of a big head on the top if the roots aren't big enough to be able to support that. So you always want to start with the roots. And that's what this is basically a root stimulant. It's got a lot of other things in it that help the plant as well. But this is where you want to start. And it's great for, like Jim had said, is that any stressed plants, things that are stunted, they're not doing well, this is what you want to use to bring it back, because it starts with stimulating more root growth so that it can more naturally pump up to the top and get more top growth to the plant.
As Paul mentioned, the roots are most important, and there can be a better example than this. You take any shrub or plant and you hard prune that thing to the ground, it comes right back. Because it's got an established root system. It's there, and it can produce the top growth. The other way, you can't have top growth and then produce the roots. It doesn't work. Plant dies. Well, let's talk about Gold Dust for a minute, okay? As a starter fertilizer, it's a supplement or a companion to the Dr. Q's Plant Tonic. It'll be available to plants for quite a long time, 2 or 3 months longer. What's really good about this, if you want to use more than it says, it's not going to hurt the plant. 100% groundwater safe, no noxious elements, no chemicals, nothing that would create problems for your environment. You don't want bad stuff to get into the water table. And that's one of the reasons that we have this fertilizer and the others. They're all groundwater safe. But it began with gold dust starter fertilizer. It expanded from there. And we swear by that to this day.
Adding to the groundwater safe of all of our fertilizers as well with C-Source, they've developed and worked on trying to keep as much of these excess leaching of chemicals out of the soil into our groundwater. So a lot of the products that we use have certain proprietary ingredients that will help to keep the products where they're needed around the root system much longer than normal fertilizers will, and prevent them from leaching into groundwater as quickly. So they're much, much safer to use on our whole line of Dr. Q's products.
So all of our Dr. Q line products, they're all groundwater safe, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
So after 30 years, we've developed what is now the entire Dr. Q line. And if you are a Star Nursery customer and you've been inside of our stores, maybe looking at our displays can be a little bit overwhelming. And we've all kind of been salespeople within the stores, and we've spoken with customers just like you who may be a little overwhelmed. But how is it speaking with those customers, and what is your guys' experience as somebody who can educate the customer about our products? And what kind of advice would you give a customer that is overwhelmed?
Well, as I might have mentioned earlier, it's a convenience line. So if you're looking for a particular fertilizer, there it is. But I can't tell you how many times I've been in the stores and seen people stand there with a bag and put that down, pick up another one, and they're scratching their heads and they don't know what to do. So you approach them and say, you have a question, a particular fertilizer you're looking for? Well, I already have vegetable tomato food, but I also have roses. Do I need to buy rose food and the vegetable tomato food? So it's an educational thing. So approach the customer, ask the question. The answer is take a look at the numbers, okay? Education. Okay, look at the numbers on this bag. You see what these are? And you can tell them what they mean. You see the other bag? Like, let's see, where do we have? We don't really have the vegetable tomato food, rose food. Is it buried somewhere? Anyway, we have several that are very close. Fruit, nut tree food, and citrus food, for example, very, very close. So do I need a bag of each if I have both? You don't have to. One of these will do both. I found this, rather than say, yeah, you better buy it, it's a register thing. Being honest with the customer, showing them what the difference is, explaining it to them so they'll understand, boy, does that make a difference. Because if people will tell people, they come in, they don't have any problems with our products, and they're very happy because of the advice we give them. So it's not dumbing down the fertilizer line, but it's explaining to people how some of the fertilizers can be used interchangeably where others cannot. Palm food, for instance, the example is just for palms. If you put that on something else, is that going to hurt it? Probably not. But that specifically is for palms because the formula is different. Turn the bag over, take a look at it. It's not the same as the others. So education is the key to the customer, is the key to our success.
After 30 years, the Dr. Q line is still expanding. This year, 2023, we celebrated 40 years here at Star Nursery. And to celebrate, we also released our latest fertilizer, Stardust, which is OMRI listed. It is 100% organic. And we're very proud of all of our products. And some products, they are a little underrated, including our lawn fertilizers, which aren't talked about enough. And we've actually switched our table display a little bit to show you guys our Royal Flush. And we also have our lawn fertilizer Winter Gem as well. It's not here with us today, but you can see it at the store. And also on the table, we have our Iron Worker and our Triple Play, which we talked about earlier. But one of you, Dr. Q's, would you like to talk about our lawn fertilizers and how that can be applied for our desert gardeners who still have their lawns?
Why don't we split it up? I'll take Winter Gem,
Yeah.
and I'll turn it over to you for Royal
All
Flush.
right.
Winter Gem was developed as a specific cold weather fertilizer, ideally applied when the temperature is not over 70 degrees. The reason for that is the nitrogen, which creates the green grass, is nitrate nitrogen, which dissolves in water, is immediately available to the grass. And in the wintertime when it's cold and the microbes aren't working, that nitrogen is still used. So people that want a green lawn in the winter, they want to keep mowing their lawn all January and February, that's fine. But if they want a green winter lawn, Winter Gem is the fertilizer to use.
All right. And opposed to that, the Royal Flush is one that is good actually for all year round because it has multiple types of nitrogen. Like Jamed said, the nitrate nitrogen is the one that is water soluble. It's dissolved by water. So as soon as you put it on and you water it, it's going to start releasing nitrogen. So that's why it'll could keep the lawn green during the cold months, because the other types of nitrogen, like that are in most common lawn fertilizers, are like ammoniacal nitrogen, which is actually released by the soil organisms, the bacteria and organisms in the soil that actually break down that fertilizer into what the plant can absorb and use and get nitrogen up to the leaves. Okay, so this one can be used pretty much year round, but it's not going to green a lot in the cold months. Like Jamed said, the Winter Gem is going to be the one you want to use in cold weather to keep lawns green. Otherwise, the Royal Flush is a great one for, it's got both the ammoniacal nitrogen, which is released more in the warmer weather when the soil bacteria and organisms are more active. It will release it quicker in the warm weather. And then it's also ureic fertilizer, which is actually a slow release fertilizer that is available on a longer stretch of time. It releases for longer periods. So that's why this one is very good for pretty much all year round.
Now, does that mean that you can have fewer applications throughout the year, or is it okay to apply, in close proximity to each other?
You can use it, possibly every 8 or 10 weeks apart, but it's not necessary. I mean, because of the nitrogen that it does have, it's going to last over a longer period. So you could use it as little as twice a year and probably have a perfectly good lawn. And unless you wanted to have new growth every week so that you could run your lawnmower more often, then yeah, you could use it more frequently.
And finally, this is a really exciting part, I think, is to get to talk about our organic nitrogens, which are the bone meal and the blood meal. Jim, you want to tell us all about it?
Yeah, I absolutely love our bone meal. It's different than any other kind of bone meal on the market. Why? Because it moves in the soil. Standard bone meal that you would put in around the bottom of roots right there where the plant is, 10 years from now, it's still going to be in there. Maybe some of it is used, but it doesn't break down at all or move in the soil. Our bone meal, when you add water, it activates and it moves. I have customers that come in and get bone meal to make cat food with. Why do they do that? Is it our bone meal is a culinary grade. You can actually eat it. You can make gravies with it. We don't do that with ours because it's not a sterile production. That's the only reason. That bone meal produced in sterile conditions is good for food and can be used in food dishes. And it is the only one on the market you can do that with.
Same is true for the blood meal. Blood meal is an excellent source of all organic nitrogen, where a lot of other fertilizers are chemically made nitrogen and aren't organic. The blood meal is an organic source of nitrogen, and it is also food grade. I mean, it can be used as in edibles. A lot of people use both blood and bone meal in manufacturing of horse fertilizers or cattle fertilizers. So it's all edible sourced, very very good ingredients, and like Jim Ed said, it's able to move because it dissolves into that soil water. It can move around the root zones more readily than just the old bone meal that's calcified.
Ground up cow bones.
Yeah, ground up bone.
Basically.
And it just sits in the soil where you put it.
Well, it has been a huge honor to be sitting amongst the Dr. Q's, and I've been so honored to be included in this group of Dr. Q's, and be able to do the house calls and really just be able to hear from the beginning how our store brand and how our products came to be and the difference that we are making in our environment, the service that we offer to our customers. And we are just I am so grateful for you gentlemen. I'm so thankful for what you have done to help all of us understand who we are, what we do, and why we do it, and why it's important that the customer get to walk in a store and make really great choices. So thank you for everything. Thank you for spending the time talking about our beautiful line, our full line of fertilizers. And we just welcome anybody out there that is in driving distance to a Star Nursery location to come in, meet with our salespeople. All of our salespeople know our products, are passionate about our products and what we do. And anything that you guys need, you can always reach us at Dr. Q's house calls at starnursery.com. You can reach us, and I can get you to either Jim Ed or Paul or myself at any time.
We hope that you guys all enjoyed learning about the Dr. Q line. If you want to stay up with Star Nursery and everything we have going on, make sure to check out our website as we have events posted on www.starnursery.com. You can follow us on Facebook at Star Nursery, Instagram at Star Nursery LV, or just send us a message through email. You know, we're always available to answer your questions, and we're always here for you. Make sure to try out the Dr. Q line and let us know how it goes, and we will see you all next month.